Welcome, everyone. My name is Angelina Carleton, the hostess of the Design Your Legacy podcast, where I look to distill the best practices, positive examples in action, and the best ideas to inspire you. As today's affluent are two-thirds self-made, I hope to invite a variety of guests from many walks of life and income levels to bring you their insights and experiences. These guests range from family office professionals, Hollywood directors, to those in Generation Z as they each contribute their thought leadership to this subject of legacy. I hope to provide interesting guests who will challenge your beliefs with their strong bias towards optimism and how you too can value your life, time, and personal legacy. This morning, I'd like to introduce Dave Combs, my cousin, to our conversation today. He is a songwriter, photographer, entrepreneur, and author with 4 decades of experience writing over 120 songs. He's also created 14 albums of soothing, relaxing instrumental piano music. His songwriting began with the now popular standard Rachel song, and his music has been played millions of times worldwide on radio, satellite, and all internet streaming media, as it continues to touch the lives of millions of people all over the world. And he's also the author of the best-selling new book, Touched by the Music: How the Story and Music of Rachel's Song Can Change Your Life. Welcome, Dave.
Thank you, Angelina. It's a pleasure to be here. And also, we were delighted to find out that you and I are indeed cousins. That's great.
Yes. So is there anything that I may have missed regarding your background that you would like to share? Or should we get started with the first question?
I think we can just get started. That kind of wraps it up.
Okay, good. So you were inspired by real tragedy and grief. Would you share the story as well as how you overcame this?
Sometimes in life, your emotions can generate an inspiration. You know, when you're in a deep emotional state, sometimes that creativity boils or rises to the top. Well, such was the case for me in 1980. I lost my father to an automobile accident, and right before Christmas. It was very tragic, and it really affected me. That was the first real taste of close-up grief that I had experienced. And so following that tragedy, during the following month of January, I'm sure, going through all of the roller coaster rides of emotions of grieving for my father. And one of my ways of release and relaxation is to sit down at the piano and play music. Music's always been a big part of my life, but to sit down at the piano and play something kind of is a release for me. And this particular time, I remember sitting down at the piano, and I had just freshly tuned the piano. It was a 100-year-old piano, and it wouldn't hold its tune.
And what year? And what year was this?
This was in 1981. Now, my father died December 22nd, 1980.
Okay.
So in January of 1981 would have been the time frame.
Okay. So here you are in Tennessee, 1981. Okay.
Yes. Now, this time I'm working in North Carolina. I'm living and working in North Carolina at that time.
Okay.
I'm from Tennessee, but
Okay.
my job was in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. So I'm here, and that evening I sat down at the piano after I'd tuned it and played. I always play something after I freshly tuned the piano. And this time, when I put my fingers on the keyboard and started playing, I played this song, this melody and song. It was just there. It came through me to my fingers to the piano, and I just played it. And it had a verse and a chorus, and it really sounded pretty, and I enjoyed playing it. And I really didn't think much about it, Angelina. It was one of those things where, it just happened. And then I would play that song, fairly frequently, along with other things I would play. And then a couple of days later, my wife, Linda, came home from work, and she says, "What's this song I've got stuck in my head?" She hummed a little bit of it, the tune. And I said, "Well, it doesn't have a name." And she says, "What do you mean? You play it all the time." So I said, "Well, it's just something I guess I just made up." And she got all excited and said, "Well, have you written it down?" And I said, "Well, no, it's up here in my brain. I've got it." She says, "Oh no, something might happen to you, and we'd lose that song. So you write it down." I did, and so I did write that song down. But that, to your question about the role that grief and emotions play in your life and how you overcome them, that's what happened, I think. And now that I look, I had no idea at the time, but looking back, I really do believe that it was my grieving over my father, who dearly loved music. He'd rather play the piano than eat. And so he really influenced my life to love music. And so
Oh,
that influence, I think, was part of the impetus for my writing that song.
yeah. So music then helped you overcome that grief that you were blindsided with, a tragedy that was unexpected in your life.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, very good. Thank you for that introduction so that the listener can understand the backstory regarding what inspires the music, whether it's that heartache or, the joys of life. And many times it's heartache that somebody is working through in that moment, and it comes out through the music.
Yes, that's the way I think it is anyway. If you talk to many composers or songwriters, they will express the same kind of thing. I think that their songs really come out of their life experiences and the roller coasters rides that they if you listen to country music, it doesn't really matter whether it's country music or rock music or any, they're all expressing feelings and emotions, and that's what comes through in the music, and that's what makes music so powerful.
Yes. So I realized music also makes a connection in the brain to an event or an emotion. So would you explain how this works and also how this related to the success of your songs and CDs?
I've done a lot of thinking about that because, and I think there's a lot of research articles about the effect of music on the brain and this kind of thing. But to me, if you connect your senses with the music, for example, if you hear a song that you love and you're in a place where you remember what the sounds were that were around you, the music, you remember what did it smell like? Were you outside in a nature setting, or were you in a gift shop where you smell all the scented candles and that kind of thing? And what did you see? Did you see some beautiful scenery, or were you, for example, at the birth of a child? Those kind of things are seared into your brain.
Yeah.
And if you can associate those things with a song or with music, I think that is where those memories of those feelings get connected. And I have so many letters from people who have written me and said how, and in fact, they're very descriptive in where they were and what they were doing when they heard Rachel's song. And I
Yes.
always thought that was very interesting because they're all different, but it was one of those things 20 years later, they could still tell you to the minute exactly where they were, what they were doing, everything when they first heard Rachel's song.
Yes.
And that's powerful.
Yes, and one of the things we talked about before the Zoom started recording is how music can melt somebody's heart and bypass those brick walls.
Yes, you can
Yes.
find somebody that's thinks they're very hard-hearted and whatever, and if the music can just go through there and break all those barriers down, and have the most hard-hearted person shedding some tears pretty quickly. So it can really melt your heart.
Yes, and one of the things I also shared is that I had the song on repeat. And so I will see if I can include the song at the end of this conversation. I'll have
Okay,
to see on the editing part, but yes,
sure.
yes.
That'd be great. That would be great.
So if we take a look down history lane for a moment, there wasn't necessarily like the Nashville music scene that you had pursued. It was a gift shop. Is that correct? In the Washington, D.C. area.
That's
So
correct.
would you speak to the business side of how you were able to launch your music career and make it a full-time gig, walk away from your job at AT&T?
Well, it was a long journey. Now, I wrote the song in 1981, as I said. I named it in 1983 at the christening service of our godchild Rachel, where I had played the song and named it after her. In 1986, 3 years later, I recorded Rachel's song with Gary Prim being the artist. And in 1988, I did a whole album, a CD and cassette tape album of Rachel's song and some other songs I had written. So then the thing you're asking about is, then what did I do with that turned it into a business that allowed me eventually to quit my good paying job at AT&T and do nothing but my music full time.
Yes.
Well, I first started thinking that I could sell my music because it was so well received in the standard way of selling music through record stores back then.
Yes,
Well,
and I'm just shining the flashlight for a moment because you thought outside of the box. So I think that this story is worth sharing.
yes. So it was outside the box because the box didn't want to have anything to do with me. When I went into the box store to sell my music, thinking they would take it, they didn't really have any inclination to carry my instrumental music that they disparagingly called elevator music. We don't sell elevator music here, you
Yeah.
know. So I had to think outside the box, think there's got to be another way, and there was. A friend of mine at work had a good friend of hers that owned a gift shop in Old Town Alexandria. We were living in Virginia at the time, in Maryland at the time.
Okay.
And so her friend that owned the gift shop, she gave her a CD of Rachel's song, and she happened to play Rachel's song on her CD player in the shop over this sound system in the store.
Yes.
And what happened was, every time she played my CD of Rachel's song, all the customers in her shop would come over to the counter and say, "What is that music you're playing? I want to buy that and take it home with me. Do you have it for sale?" Well, she didn't, because all she was doing was playing it.
Yes.
So she called me and said, "Dave, you've got to sell me some CDs so that I can sell to my customers." Time that anybody had approached me about selling my music at retail to customers.
Yes.
So
And I just want to interrupt for a moment. It was played like after like John Philip Sousa.
yeah, the shop was called America in Old Town Alexandria, and she sold patriotic stuff and played patriotic music like John Philip Sousa, all the big pompous music. Well, you can imagine the contrast when John Philip Sousa's band stops, and here comes Rachel's song that is just totally contrasting. It's soothing, relaxing, quiet, melodic, peaceful. The contrast was unbelievable. So
and yet, and yet,
and yet
people loved it.
They loved it. They were almost drawn to it, and so they would go and ask about it. Well, I took Jane a box full of CDs that evening, and thinking, "Oh, we'll see how this goes." And then less than a week later, she calls me back and says, "Dave, those are all gone. I need another box full of CDs." So, I took her a box of CDs and cassette tapes every week for over a year. And she sold thousands of CDs and cassette tapes out of that one little gift shop. And so that was the light bulb went off in my head to say, this is maybe how I can monetize my gift of my music, is to sell it not through record stores, but through gift shops.
Yes.
And so I said, well, there's got to be more shops like that around, surely. And so I'm a computer programmer by trade. And so I made myself a spreadsheet with a column for Jane's America gift shop. And so I saw how much she'd sold, how much I made. And then I said, well, let's say if we just had maybe one gift shop in every state. That's really, surely there's one in all 50 states. So I made me a second column that's 50 times the first column. Well, the numbers at the bottom there, the net profit, said, whoa, that's a pretty good number. That's not bad at all. So then I said, well, maybe there's 5 in every state that I could get.
Was I'm sorry to interrupt. Was Hallmark around back then?
Yeah, they were there. They eventually I had my music playing in some of the Hallmark stores.
Okay.
And
so I realized the year was probably like 1986, and I remember
88.
88. So they were probably in shopping malls, but I don't know how prevalent yet they might have been as a specialty store.
Well, they did play music. If you've gone into a Hallmark store, most of them did play music. Now, they were a harder sell because they were usually corporately controlled. Hallmark, the franchise, controlled what they did. And it was a little tougher to get them to play and sell my music in their shop. My big success, though, was in the little shops like Jane's, then the gift shop in Old Town. She owned the shop. She made the decisions what got sold and didn't in that store. So she didn't have to ask anybody. And so those are the shops that I really focused on initially.
Yes.
And so when I made my third column of 250 times column 1, I looked at the bottom and I says, Linda, looky here. This is more than I make it work. I think we could do this. I think this is great. So I knew that that was me. That was the model that I needed to follow.
Yes.
And it was going out and finding then all of those gift shops across the country. That was the big challenge.
So what I find interesting about that story is that the gift shop was the intermediary in the 80s, whereas today it's streaming services and your website. When you look back, was there a pinnacle moment, or was the pinnacle moment was the pinnacle moment when you looked at Linda and said, wow, I'm making more, or I could make more with these CDs?
Well, I think for me, one of the most interesting and pivotal moments was when I had a breakthrough on how to find all of these prospective gift shops to play my music. Well, as you can imagine, I've not been in all 50 states. I don't know where the tourist towns are. I don't know where these shops are. And so I was relying initially on just back then we called it Yellow Pages. It was the listing of all the business places. And so I had purchased the printout of the names and phone numbers of every gift shop in the entire country. And I think there was like 75,000 gift shops across the country. And this printout was about 4 inches thick of computer paper with, every shop in every town in the United States. And I said, well, I've just got to start calling these people and find out, who would be able to I can still tell you the line I used when I got the phone, and I'd say, do you sell any cassette tapes of the music that you play in your shop? And they would either say, no, we don't sell music. And I'd say, thank you, goodbye.
Okay.
Or they'd say, well, we play music, but we don't sell it. And then I would launch into well, if I sent you some of my music, would you play it and see if some of your customers might be interested? And so I'd get their name and address and so forth and send it to them. Or a third category, they would say, yes, we do sell the tapes of music that we play. And that was a rarity, very rare back then. Almost nobody did it. And I would, of course, get them to accept me sending them a free one. I did that. I made phone calls on every Saturday and Sunday because I was still working at AT&T at the time. So I had to do this on the weekends. So I would call all day long on Saturday and part of day Sunday, all these gift shops. Well, I was calling and I was only getting maybe one customer out of every 30 phone calls I was. Now, when you hear in sales, you have to get used to people telling you no.
Correct. Right.
And you don't get discouraged by it. Well, I was getting 29 no's for one yes. Well, that's a lot of work just to get one potential customer. And I realized what I was doing, I was calling the wrong gift shops.
Okay.
A lot of the gift shops were, New York, Chicago, Atlanta, right downtown. They weren't in tourist areas. They were gift shops that catered to the locals.
Okay.
Well, in a local gift shop with local customers, and I only had one album's Rachel song. Once they bought it. They're not going to buy anything else from me because I don't have anything else to sell.
Very good distinction.
So the key to it was, Angelina, that I had to have a shop that had new customers every day. And, that's a tourist shop.
Yes.
Like in the train station, Union Station in Washington, D.C. New people getting off the train coming through every day, brand new set of people. Old Town Alexandria, tourist town, new people coming through every day. So it didn't matter if you only had one song because that customer probably would only be in that shop one time in their entire life anyway. So I needed to know, where are the tourist towns in the United States?
You know what I love about the story is you just embarked on a brand new adventure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I thought, well, surely the Chamber of Commerce or the Better Business Bureau or the Department of Commerce, those people probably have a list of all the tourist towns in all the country. I called the United States Chamber of Commerce and Department of Commerce and local state chambers. Nope, no, we don't have any such a thing. And I thought, golly, how am I going to find this out? Well, I am a computer analytical nerd, I guess you would call it. So I got my thinking cap on and I thought, there's got to be a way using data. Now, this is back before we call things big data and analytics and all that. I said, there's got to be a way to let me find these people. What are the characteristics of a tourist town? Well, let's take Gatlinburg, Tennessee, for example. Town that's just loaded with gift shops. I think there may be 50 gift shops in that one little town. Well, what's the population of Gatlinburg? The permanent population.
Okay.
Oh, maybe 1,500, 2,000 people, not very many. Well, guess what? That ratio of gift shops per population, it tells you that there's no way in the world 1,500 people can support 50 gift shops. So those customers for the 50 have to come from outside of town.
Yeah.
So I said, okay, all I need to know then is I need to know how many gift shops are in a town, and I need to know how many people live there. So I found the printout that I had from the United States that I bought of all the mailing lists had by town how many gift shops. I mean, so I would go and count them. It didn't give me a count. I just manually counted them. I put that in a little spreadsheet, and then I said, okay, I need to know population. Well, I found this wonderful book called The Marketing Atlas. It was in the library. Great big book. It was about, it was about that thick. It weighed about 12 pounds. It was a huge book, but it had maps, and then in the middle of it, it had every crossroad in the United States listed with their population and some small amount of data about it. So I could take my printout of all the counts of the gift shops, go to this book, and say, okay, that town has 575 people. Row in my database, and then I said, okay, well, let's just let the computer calculate the ratio of all that and see how many people per gift shop in all these towns. And then what I did, as you can do in a spreadsheet, you just sort it. I sorted it by that ratio.
Oh, wow.
Oh, so then all of a sudden in Tennessee, for example, guess which was the top town at the top of the list? Gatlinburg, Tennessee, because the ratio was only 100 people per gift shop. Well, there's no way. The
population was small.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and in Kansas or Missouri or Oklahoma, wherever, all those gift shop tourist towns right at the top of the list. So then I didn't have to waste my time talking to the people that weren't tourist towns. I could call those gift shops.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden my hit rate went from 1 in 30 to 1 in 5, and sometimes it was almost everyone that I called would take me up on it. So you talk about that was to me a real eye-opening aha moment that really changed the way I was doing business. And I went from then, I had about 20 or so gift shops. I eventually ended up with over 1,000 gift shops across the country playing and selling my music.
Yeah, as your distribution network. What I love about that story also is that you, like you had said, you hadn't even visited all 50 states, and now you're trying to map out the country to figure out, what works, where do you go?
Mm-hmm.
And you're almost like on a journey, even though you're not in the car. Yes.
Right. Yeah. But I knew in my soul that when I called those people, if the name of the town and their ratio was a real low ratio, I knew that that's all the way they made their living was off tourists.
Yeah, it'd have to be.
Yes, so I had the confidence knowing I was talking to the right people, and it really, really worked. But that was my introduction to big data. And today there are companies. We have one here in town called Enmar. That's how they make their living, is off of using analytics and big data and helping big companies market and target. How when you're on Google or Amazon, any of those, and you're typing away, and boom, there pops up an ad. Well, how do they know I was interested in that?
Yeah.
And they've used the big data of saying, here's what you've purchased in the past, and here's something that's similar to it, and bing, we'll pop that up. That's the use. That's thinking outside the box and using analytics and big data.
So in addition to your entrepreneurial spirit, you also, and I'm going to ask you about your legacy in a moment, but in the last year or so, you decided to do something very altruistic, and it blew me away.
Well, I think you're talking about what I did with the nursing homes and assisted living facilities all across the country when this pandemic hit.
Yes.
Most of us remember those days a couple of years ago, about this, a little later than right now, but it was like in March, April timeframe of 2 years ago, that the news stories came on, and they were just heartbreaking stories. You remember about stories of these nursing homes or assisted living where they were locked down, and the families of those people could no longer, they wouldn't even let them on the premises, let alone go in the room and visit them.
Sure.
People, they were even pleading, let me at least go outside the window and say hello to my mother or my father. You know, it was so heartbreaking that they were all of a sudden locked down. Well, my mother, who passed away 4 years ago now, she had lived in a nursing home, a assisted living facility, about 5 miles from my house here, and I had visited her every day, and I knew how much she enjoyed my company and my music. I would play music for she and her neighbors there at the assisted living facility, and they loved music and they appreciated it.
Yeah. I
And
mean,
so,
how much it
yeah,
meant for her, how much it means for people to have that connection, that community.
yes. And so I decided that I had to restore at least some of that uh, ability to listen to something peaceful and music instead of turning on the TV. Because you remember back then you couldn't turn on the TV without all these bad news stories of how bad it was. And it was depressing. I mean, these people are already probably depressed by being in this tiny little room in their assisted living facility or nursing home. And then to turn the TV on and get further depressed, that's not good. So I said, I have got to get my music to these people somehow. And so I put together some YouTube videos and my photography. I love taking pretty pictures of landscapes and flowers and whatever. So I took all that, mixed them together, and made these soothing, relaxing music videos that I could then distribute for free to these people in nursing homes and assisted living facilities so that they could put that up on the screen and play it and have something to take their mind off of this trouble and the pandemic and so
And the
forth.
loneliness and the isolation or the
Yes,
hopelessness.
yes,
Yeah. I mean, it
yeah.
really blew me away because again, I want to make a business point in a moment, but I just want to shine a flashlight on the fact that it was so kind. You didn't have to do that. And we're talking
No,
about like 54,000 facilities.
yes, there are a ton of them. I think there are close to 1,000 just in the state of North Carolina. And I personally called, Angelina, I personally called over 200 of these facilities in North Carolina just to see for myself, would it be something there that they would accept and be helpful to them. And to a person, they appreciated it so much. And I would send them the links to the videos. And I got emails back that said, oh, thank you so much for doing this. Our residents really find it to be so peaceful and relaxing and helpful. And so then that was the 200 that I called. And then I eventually connected up with these associations. Now, you know,
I
there's a,
just I just want to say again, it's the fact that you cared. Like in our one of our previous conversations, I was just blown away. Like I said, sometimes people can have a corporate mentality regarding putting people in like what I call like the back of the bus, or they make people invisible. And yet you remembered,
well, I had a
you
tremendous amount
cared.
of, I had tremendous empathy for these people because I had been, or at least I had been in the facilities and witnessed firsthand the plight of these people, how isolated they almost were anyway. And then
Okay.
to lock the door and say, you can't even go out and I will slide your dinner under the door for you.
Right.
That broke my heart. And so I said, this is my way of giving back. I've got all this music and I've got all this photography. I have to give it back so that at least I will never forgive myself if I don't share this with all these people and at least help some people.
Yeah. And I just also want to make another point before we share the rest of your story, is that your experience then with cold calling for the gift shops, then you had already built like a skill set or a muscle to now parlay that into this moment in time where that preparation met the opportunity. And this time the opportunity may have not been a business opportunity. It was, you know, I might call it a legacy opportunity from top of mind.
You're right. It's the preparation that I had from calling those thousands of phone calls for gift shops. made me absolutely fearless when it came to picking up the phone and call somebody. I don't care if I'll call anybody and talk to them. I don't
Right.
have anymore. I don't have this reluctance to call somebody. So
The
I
fear of
use
rejection.
a fear of rejection. So I said, if they don't want it, they'll tell me, and I'll just go on to the next one. No does not mean no. Sometimes no just means not yet. So I called all these people, and then I called the associations in North Carolina. Every state has an association for assisted living, nursing homes, elder care. And so I found out, and I called. You can find anything on the internet now. I got their phone numbers. I did personally call all 66 associations in the entire country. Some of them are national, some of them are, most of them are state. And almost all of them said, sure, we would love to put your information about your YouTube videos in our newsletter
Okay.
that goes out to all of their members. Well, their members are those facilities that I was trying to reach. So I was able to get to all 40, I think it's 45,000 nursing homes in the country.
Mm-hmm.
I was able to get the information to all of them
Okay.
through the associations. And so the mission was accomplished.
Yes. And I just also want to add that the response, I don't want to necessarily call it fan mail, but we can call it appreciation letters.
Mm-hmm,
Then
mm-hmm.
you started to get letters.
Yes,
So you know it touched their heart. You know that it hit home.
exactly. Yeah, I got hundreds of emails from these, and they were really busy people. So I know they took the time out of their busy day to write me and
Okay.
tell me how much my music meant to their residents that they were trying to help. These are hardworking, really great people. These activity directors, their job is to keep these people in the residential areas happy and peaceful and calm down and to be for creation and enjoyment. And so those letters really meant a lot to me.
Yes. I know this question wasn't talked about beforehand. Do you know offhand what values what values did you get to honor by this endeavor?
Yes, I do, and I want to quote this to you. I
Okay.
don't want to misquote it because I love the way this states it. And this, to me, wraps up the entire thing we're talking about with my music and my all my efforts in one quote. And this is from John Wesley. He says, "Do all the good you can in all the ways you can to all the souls you can in every place you can at all the times you can with all the zeal you can as long as ever you can." Now, doesn't that just kind of sum it up beautifully? John Wesley, the famous preacher, and it's just, I think that's, to me, that's my mission. If I don't do all that I can with my music and my photography and my outreach and helping people, then that's what I've got to do. That's my
Yeah.
mission.
Yeah. And I would add also it's your energy and your time. I mean, yes, you can give your talent and you do have talent to give, but I think it just reminds us that we can all be bigger people and give where there is a need
Mm-hmm.
compared to looking at the stories on the news and thinking, oh my gosh, the world is tainted and it's gray. And yet somebody can change that conversation for, the people that are mostly, most affected.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Yeah. Yeah. So speaking about legacy moments, you have said to me that you believe, in your words, you might define legacy as what you leave behind for subsequent generations in passing on values and character. Would you speak to that for a moment, as well as what you think your legacy will be?
Well, I sure hope that my legacy will include both my music and hopefully the inspiring stories about what I did with my music for generations to come. I think my music is timeless. It's instrumental, no words. And I hope that 100, 200 years from now, they'll still be playing Rachel's song and my other music. And then my book that you see here on the Touched by the Music has a lot of these stories that I've been talking about in it and many more. And there's an entire chapter, chapter 21, that is a reprint of dozens and dozens of these wonderful notes and letters that I got from other people telling me how much my music had touched their life. So I think my legacy has got to be what I leave behind in terms of my relationships with my family and my wife and my nieces and nephews and family and aunts and uncles and cousins, but also the population in general that has over the years been touched by my music, and hopefully soon, you know, by my words in my book as well, the inspiring stories. So that's, to me, talks about me, my music, my character, where it came from, and so that, I think, is my legacy.
Wonderful. And one of the things we spoke about again before recording was I almost wondered if you're sharing happiness. So the vehicle is your music, but it's that happiness also that's in your heart. Because one of the things that I commented on is you look happy in pictures, and um, just as your father loved music and shared that purpose and passion with you, now you get to share it with others in something that you can, you know, make an energetic deposit, a spiritual deposit into their lives.
Yeah, it's you know the story of Johnny Appleseed, of how he went around the country planting apple trees.
Yes. Yeah.
I love to ride my bicycle on, and when in warmer weather, we have a greenway close to our house here. It goes for about 10 miles, and I'll get on my bicycle, and then in my backpack in my bicycle, I will have a stack of CDs of my music. And quite often, I will run into somebody, a stranger on the greenway I've never met before, and we'll start up a conversation, and then I'll say, "Well, do you enjoy piano music or whatever?" And if they say yes, then I'll say, "Well, may I give you one of my CDs to take home?" And so I have probably given away, I don't know, dozens, if not hundreds, of CDs to total strangers that I met on
Yeah.
the greenway. And instead of Johnny Appleseed, I guess I'm Davey Music. I'm spreading my music around as often as I can. So I really enjoy doing that.
And I think it will impact their lives, and because and the music, again, I'm going to see if I can include it at the end of this conversation. It's almost like it puts you into this moment of, like, I don't want to say like a time bubble, but it's almost like time stops, and the melodic, it's like it's enchanting. It's,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Yeah, it's
Well,
almost like whether somebody believes in heaven or not, it's almost just like, it's like if heaven is real, you know, and I can't opine for, you know, other people's beliefs out there, but um it's just a reminder to stay in hope, to stay in, I might use the word faith,
mm-hmm.
because there are better times to come. There is happiness. There is, let's reconnect to what is, you know, good and the most precious.
Well, I think music can literally take you to a different place, just like I'm sure you did as a little girl. As a little boy, I love to read. Well, you can get lost in a book. You know, you can read a book about a place you've never been to before, and all of a sudden, your imagination, you're there. You know, and you're taken, you're transported to that place. And I think, in a way, music can do the same thing to you. It can, if you really pay attention and listen and let it soak in, it can take you to places that you need to go. And it's funny, I've been watching a lot of the Olympics, and you know, these skiers especially, that they will have their headset on like you have on there, the earbuds, and I've noticed that, and they talk about it. They say they have their music playing that basically helps them mask out all of the rest of the world and helps them concentrate on what they need to do in their Olympic trial or their Olympic race or whatever they're doing. So music, even in an Olympic situation, helps to put them in the place where they need to be to compete at the highest level. So
Yeah.
music, isn't that amazing?
It is. It absolutely is. And I was going to make the joke. I think I'm going to write now into my legacy plan in the final minute of my life before I cross over for Rachel's song to be played. So I
Oh,
won't
bless
be
her.
afraid. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Well, I have, in fact, in my book, you'll find one of the quotes from one gentleman was, he said, I want to be taken to heaven with Rachel's song playing."
Yeah.
And so there, you're not alone in that. So
Okay, good.
it's really, really special. So, and I guess at some point you're going to want to point people to my website where
Yes,
they can
yes.
find out more about how to get their own copy of Rachel's song CD or download, or And so it's combsmusic.com,
Yes.
COMBS, just my last name.com. Dave at combsmusic.com is my email address. So check me out. It's a simple place to go, and then you can go from there to get the book or the music or whatever. But I would enjoy hearing from people. I love to get emails from people about how my music touched them. I answer them all. I read them all, and those are really, really special to me.
Yeah, and I just want to ask you about one other question, which is about guiding principles. When you look back in that moment of what I call like an act of kindness, is there any particular guiding principles, or was that the quote that you read from Mr.
That was
Wesley?
pretty much the quote that I read. That
Okay,
wrapped up my principles in one. It's basically the principle of doing everything you can with
okay,
all of the things that you're able to do for
okay.
to help somebody else. And as you said, in my case, to spread happiness. You were the one that came up with that, and I appreciate that. That really does say it rather well. That's my mission, is to spread happiness.
Okay, lovely. And I think, again, people in the world today can benefit from happiness. Not just that humans typically are focused on survival, but I think that with external stresses today, it's nice to be transported to a place of happiness and to reconnect with that. You know, whether someone's on that ski slope to perform, you know, at their best ability, or if it's just in the day-to-day moments to re-anchor to what is good and true.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Another aspect of this that we haven't really talked a lot about is what I called in my book God winks.
Yes.
Things that happened in my life that, looking back, could not have been coincidence. And I have a wonderful story in my book about a couple
Okay.
who basically were having their little baby girl, and so they went to the hospital to have the baby girl, and unfortunately the little baby girl didn't make it.
Okay.
So here they go into the hospital with high expectations, and then they're heartbroken when she didn't make it. And they had already decided to name her Rachel. And so I get this letter from this family years later. I mean, they didn't immediately write to me. They wrote me years later and told me this story. They said on their way home from the hospital, after being dismissed, the wife being dismissed from the hospital, they were on their way home. They had the radio on. And on the radio comes this song playing. It's an instrumental song. And they turned it up, and they looked at each other in the car, in the front seat. And they said, that sounds like our little Rachel telling us that everything is going to be okay.
Yeah.
And they kind of got tears in their eyes. They listened to the whole song. And then when it finished, the DJ on the radio came on and says, you've been listening to the music of Rachel's song. They just about lost. They did lose it. They almost had to stop the car.
I'm sure.
So, so they were just blown away by the coincidence, or the God wink of this song coming on the radio on their way home from this tragic, sad event with their losing their little Rachel. And so they wrote me the sweetest letter. In fact, Linda and I have subsequently called and talked to them. They're a wonderful couple. But isn't that a wonderful, sweet story of how God just reached down and says, here's this song and here's this couple that needs it, and boom, there you're going to listen to it on the radio. No coincidence.
Yeah, and I think it healed their heart.
It did, and they every time they play it, they think of their little Rachel girl that they lost. I guess it's about 25 years ago now.
Yeah. I think it goes to show also that as much as we think we have this life figured out, there's more to it.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's a big world. It's a big universe. It's
Yeah.
getting bigger. I think with the new telescope they've just launched, we're going to reach out into the further reaches of the universe. And I can promise them now that's not the end of it either. It won't see it's not going to see the end. There's no end to the universe. So it's quite a journey we're all on this wonderful planet.
Yeah, I just also wanted to share one other thing that I had mentioned this to you before, that I almost wonder in terms of God winks, if it could have been like a download even from your father, that moment. Like when they talk about authors like J.K. Rowling, she was on a train and she got the Harry Potter download. They say Taylor Swift gets downloads. And I almost wondered if it was your father's way of saying to you, I'm in heaven now. It's okay. Let me tell you how beautiful it is.
That's a great way to think of it. And yes, I have thought about that. And it's entirely, of course, there's no way to know for sure, but if you think about it, the song, you think, well, it had to come from somewhere. And so it was a communication. I didn't just make it up. I don't think it was, I think, given to me. It was a gift, and it probably had something to do with my father. So that's a great observation.
And you've stewarded it well. You've stewarded it well.
I try.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, I will close out unless there's any other thoughts that come to mind that you'd like to say this moment.
Well, first of all, I just want to say how much I have enjoyed getting to know you
Thank you.
and talking with you, and I hope that our friendship now will last for a long time.
It
And so
will.
I will look forward to communicating with you. Maybe we can do this again some other time. And I hope your listeners really are touched by the stories and the music, and I hope they will tell you so on your podcast. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
having me.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I just want to add, I think that your book is filled with inspiration to uplift people's hearts. And I also just would like to acknowledge that, you've chosen to be kind. You've chosen to bring your best self, like you had read with the Wesley quote. So, I harp on this phrase called positive role models throughout this podcast because I think people need to realize that they are always at choice, whether they are affluent, whether they're not affluent, to know that just because they might be surrounded by a tough scenario, that there are positive role models out there that are doing great things in this world.
Yes, I totally agree.
Okay. All right. So, in closing, I'm Angelina Carleton, the hostess of the Design Your Legacy podcast, as well as the founder to Legacy Planning, a boutique coaching and advisory firm based out of Beverly Hills, California, but international in those I coach. I hope to dive deep into subjects that can help a person define, develop, and execute their legacy, and continue to scour the landscape for those who can be great resources to every dimension of your legacy. For many listeners, there can never be enough education and preparation in their moot around their castle. Whether you find yourself with new wealth or generational wealth, may the content on this channel be an anchor in any storms ahead. We do our best to provide original content for your intellectual and emotional curiosity. Thank you for joining us today. And remember, I coach people on the subject of personal legacies. Of course, please do your own due diligence, as some areas are black and white, while others are gray in nature in a changing landscape. I hope you find these podcast interviews entertaining in their education. Thank you so much for joining us today.